Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Sports. And an interesting article today with a former New Zealand rugby chair blaming South Africa for the collapse in Super Rugby, claiming that decisions made in 2020 based on economic reasons made the Super Rugby no longer viable. And as a result of the South African decisions at the time, that is what caused the initial collapse of Super Rugby and has sort of set them on this path now in a week where it has been announced, well, not announced, but it has been rumored that Moana Pacifica will no longer take part in Super Rugby next season due to it not being financially viable. And all of a sudden, we're now talking about all the various decisions of how Super Rugby has kind of changed, and the fact that at the root cause, they are saying that a South African change in TV rights deals are the initial sort of start of the road to where we are now. Interesting article, an interesting sort of idea. Before we get into it, please do smash a like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. So basically, what they're saying is that initially Super Rugby was kept alive by South Africa and New Zealand financially wise. You know, that we basically subsidized the other two nations in Argentina and Australia because we brought in bigger TV rights, more commercial deals, more commercial value, and that's not uncommon. You know, at the end of the day, when you've got multinational competitions, they're not all going to bring the same kind of financial. It's not a case of, right, guys, everybody brings $100 million to the table. That means you've got a $400 million competition. You know, at the end of the day, you look at who are the sponsors, and we always had, you know, the Vodacom Super Rugby here, and overseas would be a different name, and. But those weren't always on the same sort of, financial ramifications. The TV deals were different in terms of what SuperSport was paying versus what a Sky was paying versus what ESPN might pay, for example. Even, you know, your commercial deals with the Super Rugby itself on sort of service providers and the likes of that, it's always going to be a little bit different. And basically, apparently, the big thing was a change in TV rights money. So the article says as follows. So basically, it's from Brett Impey, who's a former New Zealand rugby chair, and he basically pointed to three key factors that led to the split, and kind of that's where Super Rugby came from. He says, I don't think there was any choice. There was a combination of factors. First of all, there was COVID, which we kind of knew. I mean, we couldn't get over there. He said there was a restriction on airfares and the likes of that. We couldn't get across there. They couldn't get to here. Flights were very expensive. It wasn't feasible, and they had a mini Super Rugby between New Zealand and Australia sides at the time. At the time, we were still supposed to come back to it. But he did say, and it was true, he said, secondly, South Africa always wants to go north, and we did. We've been looking to go north for quite a while for a variety of reasons, but financially was always the biggest one. And as he says, you know, we had to subsidize, and we brought a lot of financial value into Super Rugby. It was no longer the most attractive financial option for us. Going to Europe, getting foreign currency in, getting access to those sort of commercial opportunities did present a much more lucrative and therefore much more viable situation at a time when SA Rugby, let's call it a spade, quite flat broke, to be honest. SuperSport had to bail them out all those years ago, essentially. And SA Rugby basically said they wouldn't have been able to continue. So they needed to basically chase the money at the end of the day, and that was in North. Obviously, there was time zones issues. Logistically, it was going to work a little bit better from that regard. But the big thing was we needed the money. We had to chase where the money was going to come from, and that was always going to be from going north. So he says the killer blow is that from 1995 right through to 2020, all of Super Rugby and sans on negotiations and television had been in US dollars. He said in 2020, SuperSport in South Africa changed it to the rand, and basically said the exchange rate's different. So the amounts, for example, going up in US dollars, where at one stage it was 3-1 of the rand, and now it's 12-1. Changed quite dramatically. And basically, from that regard, it meant that South Africa would no longer have been bringing in the kind of revenue that previously there were. And he said that the South Africans made it completely uneconomic, and had we gone ahead with it, New Zealand Rugby would have had to subsidize not only Australia and Argentina, which South Africa and us had done for years in a very free and open manner, to having to subsidize the lot, which they simply could not afford. It's an interesting concept because it would have been interesting to see if they could have afforded it, if they would have kept going with it. You know, I mean, he said that it wasn't viable at the end of the day, but it would have been interesting if financially it was all right for us to continue, whether we would have continued to go north. But we had to make a decision at the end of the day, and I suppose New Zealand Rugby had to make a decision as well. I don't think it's necessarily sour grapes, but we could not continue to subsidize a competition whilst we bled money. We needed to go and find new revenue streams. Ironically, we then actually going into Europe had to subsidize our 4 teams for all these years initially until we got full membership, and now we will start to hopefully reap the rewards. But financially, we're already seeing the investment into our teams from overseas, corporations, the likes of that. Similarly, they're seeing out. I mean, invest in Champions Cup. So now we're seeing a South African company going and sponsoring the EPCR Champions Cup. So financially, we're definitely seeing the potential for the large amounts of growth in going into Europe. Now that we are full members of the United Rugby Championship, and we'll see dividends, that we are members of the EPCR and we will see money from that. Hopefully now we'll be able to see our teams not struggle financially. And SA Rugby, who have almost like quadrupled their revenue in the last couple of years. I mean, I think their sponsorship revenue went from being like 200 million to being $1 billion in like 1 year, basically. We're now going to be able to really leverage the Springbok brand and hopefully our local sides as well to really start to ramp up the kind of money that we can make and pour into the programs that we kind of want to do. And basically, old MP said, it's been one of my criticisms of the media is the lack of business and economic analysis of these sort of issues. And I suppose he makes a good point, because a lot of people haven't spoken about the fact that, financially it was the right thing to do. And basically said that, do we need South Africa from a playing point of view? Do we not? But at the end of the day, all these competitions and professional sport is a business. The financial decisions are always the final decisions. We're not going to go back to Super Rugby because we believe it provides a better opportunity for us to make our teams better if it's going to make a loss. We have to go where it's financially viable for us to play and thrive. And I think we basically looked at the whole picture of the Northern Hemisphere project and thought financially it's a lot better, logistically it's a lot better. And I also think that, to be fair, playing-wise, I think it's a lot better. I think we get exposed to more conditions. I think we get exposed to different types of teams. We maybe might not get exposed to your New Zealand size and the style of rugby like that. But I think at the moment we really do have the best of both worlds, and that we play against European sides all the time, and then we have a rugby championship where we get to play 6 games against Southern Hemisphere sides. So I think we get quite a nice balance. I genuinely think we've got the best of both worlds, and I think that's gone a long way towards our success from a Springbok point of view. Is that when we went over to France, it wasn't like this is now the players only like first or second time in France. Most of these players have played. Some of these players have even played in France for French teams. But also, a lot of these players have played in France in the EPCR, or at least played in different European countries with similar types of conditions, against similar types of rugby. Big players, very forward-orientated, set-piece dominated games, and been exposed to those kind of conditions, which we always talk about the diversity of Springboks being the biggest strength. The diversity in opposition, the diversity in conditions is a key part of that as well. An interesting article. What are your thoughts? Let me know down in the comments below. Smash a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve, and I'll chat to you soon.